The Barrett 50 caliber's bolt slammed home with a metallic finality that made General Harlan Pierce stop mid-stride. Not the rifle he'd seen 1,000 of those. It was the small bronze badge pinned above the shooter's breast pocket. 200 meters confirmed. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. In 28 years of service, he'd never seen that number. Hell, most snipers couldn't even see that far, let alone put steel on target. The woman cleaning the rifle didn't even look up. Staff Sergeant Aria Nguyen just kept working her movements precise as a surgeon's while the general's world tilted on its axis. "That badge," he said, his voice cutting through the armory's morning bustle, "is either the greatest lie ever worn on a uniform, or I'm standing in front of someone who shouldn't exist." Aria finally raised her eyes, calm, dark, unblinking. "Would you like me to show you which one it is, sir?" What happened next would shatter every assumption the general had about the limits of human capability, expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military intelligence, and force a choice between taking the shot that could end everything or the restraint that could save it all. I'm about to tell you a story that will change how you think about precision, power, and the weight of a single bullet. Stay with me until the end, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. The armory at Forward Operating Base. Falcon hummed with its usual morning rhythm. The scrape of cleaning rods through barrels, the snap of magazines being loaded, the low murmur of pre-mission chatter. But in the corner near the long gun racks, there was a pocket of silence around Staff Sergeant Aria Nguyen. She worked on her Barrett M82A1 with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. Each component came apart under her hands, like she was conducting a symphony only she could hear. The massive rifle, which most operators treated like a sledgehammer, she handled like a violin. General Harlan Pierce had walked past 100 snipers cleaning their weapons. It was background noise to his morning rounds, as routine as his black coffee and Euro 600 briefing. But something made him slow his pace as he passed the sergeant's workstation. Maybe it was the way the other soldiers gave her space, not out of disrespect, but something else. Reverence. Fear. Then he saw the badge. Bronze unassuming, pinned precisely above her right breast pocket. The numbers etched into it shouldn't exist. 3200 SMS confirmed. Pierce's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. The ceramic trembled slightly in his weathered hand. "Sergeant," his voice cut through the armory like a blade. Every head turned, but Aria's hands never paused in their work. She seated the recoil buffer with a soft click before looking up. "Sir?" Pierce stepped closer, his eyes locked on the badge. Around them, the armory had gone silent. Even the ventilation seemed to hold its breath. "That badge, 3,200 meters. He set his coffee down on a crate, the sound sharp in the quiet. "That's 2 miles, Sergeant." "Actually, sir, it's 1.98 miles. 2 miles would be 218.69 meters. A nervous chuckle rippled through the watching soldiers, quickly stifled when Pierce's jaw tightened. Chief Warrant Officer Miguel Serrano, Patch to everyone who'd served with him, materialized at the general's shoulder. The stocky Texan had been Pierce's shadow for 3 years, his skepticism as reliable as sunrise. General, Patch said loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's past the edge of what physics allows. At 200 meters, a 50 cal is already drinking air. The round destabilizes, goes subsonic. You'd have better luck throwing rocks at the moon." Aria's hands resumed their work, threading a boar snake through the Barrett's barrel. "Chief Serrano, your understanding of external ballistics is approximately 3 decades out of date." The armory went even quieter, if that was possible. Nobody talked to Patch that way. Nobody. Patch's face flushed red. "Excuse me, Sergeant." Arya pulled the boar snake through with one smooth motion. The M33 ball ammunition you're thinking of does go transonic at 100 meters, but the Hornady AMAX 750 grain match rounds maintain supersonic flight to 300 meters. Add altitude density corrections, and you can push that envelope significantly further. She looked up, meeting Patch's glare, with those unnervingly calm eyes. Also, your range card for this morning's shoot is off by 36 meters. The weather station hasn't been calibrated since the last sandstorm. Barometric pressure reads 29.82, but it's actually 29.46. Patch yanked out his range card, squinting at the numbers. His face went from red to pale. Pierce picked up his coffee again, taking a slow sip, while studying the small woman who'd just dismantled his XO's expertise as efficiently as she'd stripped her rifle. "Sergeant Nguyen," he said, rolling the name carefully. "Vietnamese, American, sir, born in Nebraska, though my grandfather would appreciate your pronunciation." "And this badge, where did you earn it?" "Classified location, classified operation, sir. What I can tell you is that it was verified by 3 independent spotters and DARPA telemetry." Captain Rebecca Walsh, the base intelligence officer, had been listening from behind a rack of M4s. She stepped forward, her tablet already in hand. "Sir, I can pull her file. No need, Captain." Pierce set down his cup with deliberate slowness. "Sergeant, stand up." Arya rose smoothly to her feet. At 5'4", she had to tilt her head back to meet the general's eyes, but somehow she didn't seem small. "You claim you can hit a target at 200 meters. "I don't claim it, sir. I've done it. The range here only goes to 200. "That's enough to demonstrate methodology, sir." Pierce looked at Patch, who shrugged his universal gesture for, "This should be interesting." "1 hour," Pierce said. "Range 7. Bring your impossible shots, Sergeant. We'll see what's real and what's fantasy." As he turned to leave, Arya's voice followed him, quiet but clear. "Sir, will this be a standard demonstration, or should I prepare for operational conditions?" Pierce paused. Something in her tone not challenging, just knowing. "What makes you think it would be anything other than standard? Because you walked past 17 other snipers this morning without stopping, sir. Something brought you to my station, and in my experience, generals don't verify badges unless they need what those badges represent." The armory had become a tableau. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Pierce turned slowly back to face her. "1 hour, Sergeant. Impress me." As the general's footsteps faded, the armory exploded into hushed conversation. Arya went back to her rifle, threading a cleaning patch through the barrel. Patch lingered, studying her with narrowed eyes. "That shit about my range card, lucky guess." Arya held up the patch. It was barely dirty. The barrel was already pristine. She'd been cleaning a clean rifle, keeping her hands busy while her mind worked. "Chief luck is just probability that hasn't been calculated yet." She glanced at the window where dust motes danced in the morning light. "Also, the wind outside is running 4.7 meters per second from the southwest, gusting to 6.2. But the range flags won't show it because there's a thermal inversion at 12 feet. You'll want to account for that." Patch stared at her for a long moment. "How the hell do you know that—" She pointed to the dust motes. "Particle velocity differential between ground level and ceiling height. The ventilation pulls outside air. Watch the patterns." Before Patch could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steady again. Arya's hands stilled on her rifle. "That's not the generator cycling." The armory phone rang. Captain Walsh answered, her face going pale as she listened. "Sir," she called to Patch, "Range 7 is being evacuated. There's been a situation." Patch grabbed the phone. His expression darkened with each word he heard. When he hung up, his face was granite. "Sergeant Nguyen, gather your gear." The demonstration's canceled. No, it just became very, very real. He looked at the badge on her chest. Hope to God that's not fiction because we're being redirected to Ridge 419, operational override effective immediately. Arya was already moving the Barrett coming apart for transport with practiced efficiency. Rules of engagement. Unknown. All I know is someone just tasked our training demonstration for live Overwatch. His voice dropped. And nobody on this base authorized it. The lights flickered again. This time they stayed off for 3 full seconds before the backup power kicked in. In those 3 seconds of darkness, Arya's voice was steady as steel. Chief, someone knew we'd be on that range. They knew the exact time. When the lights came back, she was already heading for the door, the Barrett case in one hand, her spotter's kit in the other. How do you figure that? Patch called after her. She paused at the threshold, silhouetted against the harsh morning light. Because if I wanted to use a sniper team without official authorization, I'd piggyback on their training schedule, make it look routine until it was too late to abort. That would require inside knowledge. Yes, she said simply. It would. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Someone had turned their demonstration into an op, someone with access to classified schedules, someone who knew exactly what that badge on her chest meant. Sergeant, Patch said, his voice tight. That 200-meter shot. What were the conditions? Arya turned back, her face unreadable. Altitude 400 feet. Air density 0.83. Target was moving, wind was gusting 15 to 25 meters per second. 3-second flight time. Jesus Christ. And you hit it? I hit it. What was the target? For the first time since Pierce had noticed her badge, Arya smiled. It was a cold, professional thing, the smile of someone who'd seen the edge of human capability and pushed past it. The target, Chief, was a problem that needed solving from a very long distance, just like whatever's waiting for us on Ridge 419. She disappeared into the morning glare, leaving Patch standing in the armory with a horrible certainty growing in his gut. This wasn't going to be a demonstration. It was going to be a hunt, and someone had just sicked the apex predator on prey that didn't know it was being stalked. The other soldiers in the armory started moving, the spell broken, but whispers followed in Arya's wake. Did you see Pierce's face? 200 meters. That's impossible. Maybe it's a PSYOP badge intimidation factor. Did you see how she stripped that Barrett-like water flowing? Patch looked scared. I've never seen Patch scared. Private First Class Jackson, fresh out of sniper school, voiced what everyone was thinking. What kind of shot requires 2 miles of distance? An older sergeant cleaning his own rifle answered without looking up. The kind where you can't afford to miss, and you really can't afford to be close when it's over. The lights flickered one more time. On Ridge 419, 17 miles away, 3 technical vehicles were converging on a medical clinic. Inside, 47 civilians were about to become statistics unless someone could thread a needle through hurricane winds at distances that shouldn't be possible. That someone was already in a Humvee calculating wind drift in her head, while Patch white-knuckled the radio trying to figure out who'd turned their dog and pony show into a combat operation. General Pierce stood in the operations center, staring at the real-time satellite feed. The timestamp showed they had 18 minutes before those technicals reached the clinic. Sir, Captain Walsh said, I've found something. The demonstration schedule was accessed 6 times in the last 48 hours. 5 were authorized. And the 6th, Lieutenant Colonel Mara Voss Intelligence. But sir, she's not even supposed to be in theater. She's on leave in... She's here, Pierce said quietly. Saw her yesterday in the East Compound. On the main screen, the Humvee carrying Arya and Patch took a hard turn toward Ridge 419. Pierce watched the dust trail rise behind them like a finger of fate. "Get me a direct line to that vehicle," he ordered. "And Captain, start pulling everything you have on Colonel Voss, quietly." "Sir, you don't think—" "I think someone just turned my sniper into bait. Question is whether they're hunting her or using her to hunt something else." The satellite feed zoomed in on the approaching technicals. Armed men, heavy weapons converging on civilians. A tragedy in the making, unless— Pierce looked at the distance readings on his screen. The closest overwatch position was 847 meters from the clinic. Well within even conventional shooting range, but exposed. The ridgeline offered better concealment, but— "Christ," he whispered, reading the measurement. 900 meters. Nearly the distance of that impossible badge. "Sir." Walsh looked concerned. "Nothing, Captain." Pierce picked up the handset. "North Star, this is Olympus Actual. How copy?" Aria's voice came back clear despite the engine noise. "Lima Charlie Olympus. North Star, be advised, optimal position is beyond conventional range. Authorization for extreme measures granted if you can execute." There was a pause. Then, "Understood. Request atmospheric readings for grid 254831. Walsh pulled up the data. Wind 5.7 meters per second, gusting to 8.1. Temperature 97 Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 29.46. Aria finished. Not 2982 like the weather station says. Pierce and Walsh exchanged glances. She'd called it exactly from inside a moving vehicle 17 miles away. "North Star, can you make that shot?" Another pause. In the background, they could hear Patch arguing about something, his voice rising and falling with the Humvee's movement. "Sir," Aria said finally, "which shot are you talking about? I count 7 possibles from that position." Pierce felt a chill despite the morning heat. 7 shots at nearly 3,000 meters, and she was calculating them from a moving vehicle using week-old satellite imagery. "The one that saves lives, Sergeant." "Roger that. North Star out." Pierce set down the handset and turned to Walsh. "Captain, I want everything on this base locked down. No communications in or out that don't go through me." "Sir, that's highly irregular." "So is a ghost colonel turning a training exercise into a live op." He stared at the screen where the technicals were now 8 minutes from the clinic. "Someone's playing a game here, Captain, and they just made Sergeant Nguyen the key piece." "You think this is about her, the badge?" Pierce remembered those calm, dark eyes, the way she'd corrected Patch's calculations without even thinking about it. "I think someone wants to see if that badge is real, and they're willing to risk civilian lives to find out." On the screen, the Humvee reached the base of Ridge 419. 2 small figures emerged, David and Goliath, in desert camouflage, one carrying a rifle that looked too big for her frame, the other hauling spotting equipment and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. They had 6 minutes to get in position, 5 minutes to set up, and 1 minute to make a shot that physics said was impossible. Pierce watched them climb Aria, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of absolute certainty. No wasted energy, no hesitation. Like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe she had. The lights in the operations center flickered again. "Backup power's struggling," Walsh noted. "No," Pierce said slowly. "Someone's testing our systems, seeing what they can interrupt." He picked up his sidearm, checked the chamber. "Captain, get a QRF to Ridge 419. Quiet approach, no radio chatter." "Sir, you think Sergeant Nguyen's in danger?" On the screen, Aria had reached her shooting position. She was already setting up the Barrett, her movements so smooth they seemed like slow motion despite her speed. "I think everyone's in danger, Captain. The question is whether that badge on her chest makes her our salvation or our biggest target." The first technical reached the clinic's outer checkpoint. Men with AK-47s dismounted, their intentions clear in their body language. Through the feed, they saw Arya settle behind her rifle. Even from the satellite view, Pierce could see her stillness, the absolute control that turned her into part of the landscape. Patch lay beside her, spotting scope, up his mouth, moving rapidly, calling wind temperature distance. Then Arya did something unexpected. She took her hand off the rifle and pointed at something off-screen. Patch swung his scope, and his whole body went rigid. "What's she seeing?" Walsh asked. Pierce leaned forward. "Something we're not." The lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. But in that second of darkness, Pierce heard it, the distinctive crack of a .50 caliber rifle somehow carried through the open comm channel from 17 miles away. When the screens came back online, one of the technicals was stopped, steam pouring from its engine block. "How?" Walsh breathed. "She couldn't have hit it yet, they just got there." Pierce smiled grimly. "She didn't hit it. She hit something else that would disable it. Watch." On screen, sparks cascaded from a transformer on a building adjacent to the clinic. The power grid in that sector died, and the technical's driver, startled by the electrical explosion, had jerked the wheel and crashed into a concrete barrier. "She used the transformer as a distraction," Pierce said. "Caused the accident without firing directly at them. No casualties, but one vehicle down." That's impossible to calculate on the fly." "So is 200 meters, Pierce replied. The second technical was now accelerating toward the clinic, its gunner traversing the mounted weapon toward the civilians visible through the windows. Pierce grabbed the handset. "North Star, you are cleared hot. Repeat, cleared hot." "Negative, Olympus." Arya's voice was steady, almost meditative. "Angle presents unacceptable civilian risk. Adjusting." "You don't have time to adjust." "I'm not adjusting position, sir. I'm adjusting the environment." Pierce watched, mystified, as Arya fired again. This time the round struck a water tank on a building 400 meters from the technical. The tank exploded, sending thousands of gallons cascading into the street. The technical hit the sudden flood at 40 miles per hour. Physics took over wheels, hydroplaning mass, shifting the vehicle, sliding sideways into a wall with a crash audible even from the drone feed. 2 vehicles down. 0 casualties. "My God," Walsh whispered. But the third technical had learned. It stopped 500 meters from the clinic, outside the flood zone, outside the electrical grid. Men dismounted, using the vehicle as cover as they advanced on foot. "North Star third vehicle is, I see it." Arya's voice had changed, dropped into something colder. "Patch, call it." Through the comm, they heard Patch's Texas drawl, now steady and professional. Wind 6.2 from southwest, gusting to 7.8. Range 847 meters. Elevation -15 degrees. Target speed approximately 1.2 meters per second. Temp. I have the temp. Give me the Mirage. Mirage is... Jesus, Arya, it's boiling. 3-inch rise at target. 3-inch is the average. What's the wave pattern? Cycling every 4 seconds. Peak to trough. Count me into a trough. Pierce found himself holding his breath. At that distance, the bullet would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds. The target would move 4 meters in that time. Wind would push the round 8 meters off course. Gravity would drop it 60 meters. And that was assuming perfect conditions, which these weren't. 3, Patch counted. 2, 1, trough. The Barrett fired. Pierce watched the lead insurgent, the one giving hand signals to the others. watched him for 3 eternal seconds. The man's rifle exploded in his hands. Not the man, the rifle. The round had struck the weapon's receiver, destroying it without touching flesh. The insurgent fell backward, stunned but alive, his hands cut by shrapnel, but nothing fatal. The psychological effect was immediate. The other fighters scattered, diving for cover, screaming about snipers. Their advance broke apart. "Confirm impact," Pierce ordered Walsh. She zoomed the satellite. "Direct hit on the weapon, sir. The fighter's injured but ambulatory. How did she—" "She chose to spare him," Pierce said quietly. "At 2,800 meters, she could have put that round anywhere. She chose the rifle." Through the comm, they heard Patch's voice, awed. "That's impossible. Nobody shoots the weapon at that range. Nobody." "I just did," Arya replied calmly. "Olympus be advised, I have eyes on a 4th element. Grid 255-834. Painting our position with laser designation." Pierce's blood went cold. "North Star, displace immediately." "Negative. If I move, they'll know they've been made." "Sir, the designation pattern is reading our thermals, not targeting for indirect fire. Someone wants to know exactly where I am." "Who has that kind of tech?" "Someone with very good intelligence, sir. Permission to return paint." Pierce looked at Walsh, who was already pulling up the grid. Her face went pale. "Sir, that position is in the blue zone. That's coalition territory." Someone on their own side was painting Arya's position. "North Star, do not engage. Repeat, do not." The lights cut out again. This time they stayed out. In the darkness, Pierce heard 3 sounds in rapid succession. The crack of Arya's rifle. Patch's sharp intake of breath. And then Arya's voice, cold as winter. "Olympus, we have a problem. The laser designation was coming from a coalition vehicle. Marking says Intelligence Corps." When the emergency power finally kicked in, Pierce found himself staring at a screen showing Lieutenant Colonel Mara Voss's service photo. Intelligence Corps, currently on leave. Except she wasn't. "Sir," Walsh said urgently, "I'm reading multiple vehicles converging on Ridge 419. They're using our IFF codes, but they're not ours," Pierce finished. He grabbed the handset. "North Star, you are compromised. Extract immediately." "Sir," Arya's voice was steady despite the situation. "Request permission to verify something first." "The wind pattern, sir. It's wrong." Pierce wanted to scream at her to run, but something in her tone stopped him. "Explain." "Natural wind at this altitude should be steady from the southwest, but I'm reading eddies every 30 seconds like rotor wash. There's an aircraft holding position approximately 2 clicks north, just behind the ridgeline." Walsh's fingers flew over her keyboard. "Nothing on radar, sir." "It's running dark," Arya said, "but it's there, and sir, the timing of those technicals, the power interruptions, my shooting position being painted, this isn't random. Someone wanted me here in this exact spot at this exact time." Pierce felt the pieces clicking together. "They're testing you." "Yes, sir. The question is whether I passed or failed in their eyes." Through the satellite feed, Pierce could see vehicles supposedly coalition surrounding the base of Ridge 419, cutting off exit routes. "North Star, you need to—" A new voice cut through the comm channel. "Female cool professional. General Pierce, this is Lieutenant Colonel Voss. Please have your sniper hold position. We need to verify some technical data." Pierce's hand tightened on the handset. "Colonel Voss, you are absent without leave and conducting unauthorized operations in my sector." "On the contrary, General, I'm conducting a vital intelligence assessment under Directive 7 Alpha. Check your classified traffic." Walsh was already pulling it up. Her face went ashen. "Sir, it's authentic. Signed by JSOC Command. Authorization for Capability Assessment of Extreme Range Assets." "North Star is not an asset," Pierce growled. She's a soldier under my command. A soldier with a very interesting badge, General, one that certain foreign interests have expressed skepticism about. We need to prove its authenticity. Through the comm, they heard Patch chamber around in his M4. Arya, we got company climbing the ridge. I see them, Arya replied. Then louder. Colonel Voss, are you willing to bet your career that your men can reach me before I put a round through your vehicle's engine block? There was silence on the channel. I'm 2,900 meters from your position, Colonel, Arya continued. At this range I can read your license plate through my scope. I can see you're wearing body armor, but you've left your throat exposed. Tactical mistake. You're bluffing, Sergeant. Nobody can make that shot consistently. The Barrett fired. On the satellite feed, Pierce watched Voss's vehicle rock as its front tire exploded. That was your front left tire, Colonel, Arya said calmly. Would you like me to demonstrate on something more critical? The vehicles approaching Ridge 419 stopped. Stand down, Sergeant, Voss commanded. That's a direct order. I don't take orders from intelligence officers conducting illegal operations, ma'am. Pierce grabbed the handset. North Star, this is Olympus Actual. You are authorized to defend your position. Rules of engagement are your discretion. Thank you, sir. Arya's voice shifted, becoming something colder, more focused. Patch wind call. Wind steady at 5.8, no gusts. Range to the aircraft behind the ridge. If your call is right, about 3,100 meters. Within tolerance. Colonel Voss, you have 10 seconds to call off your approach, or I start putting rounds through engine blocks. Your choice. Through the comm, they could hear radio chatter, Voss arguing with someone, voices raised. Then Arya spoke again, but this time in perfect Mandarin. Walsh grabbed her translation tablet, her eyes widening as she processed the words. Sir, she's talking to the aircraft. She's telling them their position is compromised and their heat signature is visible on thermal imaging. The satellite feed suddenly picked up a heat bloom, an aircraft powering up engines behind the northern ridge. Holy shit, Patch's voice came through. There really is a bird back there. It's lifting off. The aircraft rose above the ridgeline, a stealth helicopter with no markings immediately banking away to the north. Colonel Voss, Arya said, switching back to English. Your foreign observers are leaving. Operation's blown. I suggest you follow their example. There was a long pause. Then Voss's voice tight with anger. This isn't over, Sergeant. Yes, it is, General Pierce cut in. Colonel, you will report to my office immediately. Your men will stand down and return to base. Any deviation from these orders will be considered mutiny. Through the feed, they watched the vehicles begin to withdraw. All except one. Voss's damaged vehicle remained stationary. Sir, Arya said quietly. She's not moving. I see it. Can you make out what she's doing? She's on a satellite phone. And sir, she's looking directly at my position through binoculars. The lights in the operations center flickered again. This time, when they came back, every screen was showing the same thing. Arya's service record, her operational history, and centered in the middle, a photograph of that bronze badge. We've been hacked, Walsh said, her fingers flying over her keyboard. Someone's in our system. Through the comm, they heard the Barrett's bolt cycle. Olympus. Arya said, her voice deadly calm. Colonel Voss just transmitted my position to someone. I can see the data burst on her vehicle's antenna. To who? Unknown. But sir, those technicals that started all this, they're turning around. All of them. And they're heading for Ridge 419. Pierce felt his stomach drop. It was a setup. The whole thing was bait to get you in position. Yes, sir. The question is, what now? Pierce looked at the screens showing Arya's information at the approaching vehicles at Voss, sitting in her damaged vehicle like a spider in a web. North Star, can you extract? Negative. They've got the routes covered. But sir, I have 17 rounds remaining, and clear sight lines to multiple targets. Including Voss, especially Voss. Pierce closed his eyes. The political ramifications of a sniper killing an intelligence officer, even a rogue one, would be catastrophic. But leaving Arya exposed. Sir, Patch's voice cut through. We got fast movers inbound. 3 vehicles approaching from the east. They're not using any IFF. Time to intercept? 4 minutes, maybe less. Pierce made his decision. North Star weapons free. Protect yourself and get off that ridge. Copy that. Arya's voice was steady. Patch, pack it up. We're leaving. What about Voss? Through the comm, they heard the Barrett fire one more time. On the satellite feed, Voss's satellite phone exploded in her hand. She jerked back, clutching her hand, but clearly alive. Warning shot, Arya said. She'll think twice about making more calls. They were moving now. Pierce could hear it in the changes in background noise, scrambling down the ridge, equipment rattling. North Star QRF is 8 minutes out. Copy. We'll try to... Arya's voice cut off. The crack of rifle fire came through the comm. Not the Barrett's smaller caliber multiple weapons. Contact, Patch shouted. 2 o'clock, 300 meters. The satellite feed showed muzzle flashes from the approaching vehicles. They'd dismounted and were advancing on foot using cover. Can you suppress them? Not with the Barrett, Arya replied, her breathing steady despite running. Too close, too many. More gunfire. Pierce could see the rounds impacting around their position, dust plumes rising. Then Arya stopped running. Patch down. She dropped prone, the Barrett swinging around. Through the scope, she could see Voss's vehicle 900 meters away. The colonel was out now, directing the approaching fighters via radio. Arya did the math in her head. Wind distance drop. But this time, she wasn't aiming at the vehicle. She was aiming at the ground in front of it. The round impacted at Voss's feet, showering her with rock fragments. The colonel dove for cover. But that wasn't the point. The impact point was precisely calibrated, a message that anyone watching would understand. Arya could have killed her. Chose not to. But the next round? The attacking fighters hesitated, their advance slowing. She's using Voss as leverage, Walsh breathed, showing them she has their commander in her sights. Through the comm, they heard Voss's voice on the radio, high, and panicked. Pull back now! The fighters stopped advancing. Patch, move, Arya ordered. Straight down the ridge. I'll cover. You can't cover me with a... The Barrett fired again. 400 meters away, a fighter's rifle exploded in his hands, the same trick she'd used on the first technical. I can if they think I can, Arya replied. Go. They ran. Through the satellite feed, Pierce watched them descend the ridge in tactical bounds, one moving while the other covered. Except Arya's version of covering involved putting rounds near fighters over a mile away, each shot precisely calculated to create maximum psychological impact without unnecessary killing. A rifle destroyed here. A rock exploded there. A vehicle's mirror shattered. Each shot, a message: I can touch you whenever I want. The fighters pulled back, their morale shattered. Who advances against a sniper who can reach out from beyond the edge of perception? 1 minute to QRF, Pierce announced. Through the comm, they heard engines, the quick reaction forces vehicles approaching fast. But also other engines. The unmarked vehicles converging. It's going to be close, Walsh said. On the screen, Arya and Patch had reached the bottom of the ridge. They were sprinting now, the Barrett bouncing on Arya's back. The unmarked vehicles crested a rise 500 meters from them. The QRF rounded a corner 300 meters out. For a moment, everyone was visible to everyone else. A Mexican standoff at combat speeds. Then Arya did something unexpected. She stopped, turned, and raised the Barrett to her shoulder, standing unsupported, the massive rifle held like a regular carbine. An impossible shooting position for a weapon that size. She aimed at the lead unmarked vehicle. "She can't make that shot," Walsh said. "Not standing, not after running." The Barrett fired. The lead vehicle's hood exploded, the engine block cracked in half by the .50 caliber round. The vehicle died instantly, slewing to a stop. The other unmarked vehicles slammed on their brakes. The QRF accelerated, and Arya lowered the Barrett, standing in the open, waiting. Through the satellite feed, Pierce could see it all, the geometry of violence held in perfect suspension. If anyone moved wrong, everyone would die. "North Star," Pierce said quietly. "The QRF is 30 seconds out." "I know, sir." Her voice was calm. "Just need them to know something first." She called out, her voice carrying across the desert. "The next one goes through the driver." The unmarked vehicles began backing up. The QRF vehicles surrounded Arya and Patch soldiers, dismounting to form a protective perimeter. But Arya kept the Barrett raised until the unmarked vehicles disappeared over the rise. Only then did she lower the weapon. Through the comm, Pierce heard her say to Patch, "We need to talk to the general." About Voss. About why she knew exactly where to send us. About why foreign intelligence was observing. And about why someone wanted to verify my badge badly enough to risk starting a war. Pierce looked at the screens, still displaying Arya's service record. In the corner of one screen, a single line of text had appeared. "Authentication complete. Asset verified. Await further instructions." He walked to the window, looking out at the base where Lieutenant Colonel Voss was being escorted under guard to his office. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. And Sergeant Arya Nguyen, the woman with the impossible badge, was no longer just a sniper. She was bait weapon, and somehow the key to something much larger than any of them understood. The lights flickered one last time. When they steadied, General Pierce was already reaching for the secure phone to JSOC. Because someone had just used his base, his people, and his sniper to verify something. And he was going to find out what. Even if it meant learning truths about that 200-meter shot that should have stayed buried in classified files. Even if it meant discovering that Arya Nguyen was exactly what her badge claimed, the impossible made real, and someone somewhere had just confirmed she was operational. The real question was for what the secure conference room in the operations building felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. General Pierce stood at the head of the table, his knuckles white as he gripped its edge. Lieutenant Colonel Voss sat in restraints, her injured hand wrapped in field dressing her face, a mask of defiance. Between them, Arya stood at attention, still in her gear dust from Ridge 419, coating her uniform like war paint. "Start talking," Pierce said, his voice low and dangerous. "And Colonel, if you even think about citing classification levels, I'll have you transferred to Leavenworth before sunset." Voss lifted her chin. "General, you don't have the authority. I have a dead satellite phone, 3 destroyed vehicles, and an international incident that nearly sparked a border conflict." Pierce slammed a folder on the table. "What I don't have is patience." Patch stood by the door, his M4 still in hand, watching Voss like she might sprout wings and fly away. Through the reinforced windows, they could see activity on the base vehicles, moving personnel running. The aftermath of the morning's chaos was still rippling outward. Arya hadn't moved since entering the room. She stood perfectly still, but Pierce noticed her eyes tracking everything, the ventilation grates, the window angles, the distance to every exit. Even now she was calculating shots. "Sergeant Nguyen," Pierce said, "tell me about the aircraft, the one behind the ridge." Chinese design, General. WZ-19 derivative, but modified for high-altitude reconnaissance. No weapons pods, just observation equipment. Arya's voice was clinical. They were recording everything. How could you possibly know the model from thermal imaging? Rotor configuration creates a specific heat pattern. The WZ-19 has a distinctive asymmetric dispersal. She paused. I've seen them before. Pierce turned to Voss. You brought Chinese intelligence to observe my sniper. Voss's jaw tightened. Not just Chinese. The Russians had a team 3 clicks south. The Israelis were monitoring via satellite, and the British had a Reaper drone at 30,000 feet. The room went silent, except for the hum of air conditioning. Jesus Christ, Patch muttered. It was a fucking auction. Not an auction, Arya said quietly. A verification. Pierce looked at her. Of your capability, of my existence. She finally moved, turning to face Voss directly. The 3 200-meter shot. Operation Blackthorn. Kandahar Province, 2019. You were the intelligence officer who classified it beyond even JSOC access. Voss's eyes narrowed. That operation doesn't exist. No, it doesn't, officially. Arya reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a small metal cylinder, a spent shell casing. She set it on the table with a soft clink. But this does. Hornady AMAX 750 grain. The one that traveled 200 meters and changed the war. Pierce picked up the casing, feeling its weight. What war? The quiet one, General. The one where a single shot prevented a nuclear scientist from delivering enriched uranium to non-state actors. Arya's eyes never left Voss. The one where the shot was so impossible that 4 nations accused us of fabricating the entire event. So you staged today to prove it was real. She staged today to sell the proof, Arya corrected. Isn't that right, Colonel? Voss's face had gone pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you accessed the demonstration schedule 6 times. I know you arranged for those technicals to threaten the clinic, knowing Pierce would deploy me. I know you had multiple foreign observers ready to document whatever happened. Arya stepped closer to the table. What I don't know is who you're selling to and why. The lights flickered, not power failure this time, but the overhead fixture struggling with age. Voss laughed, bitter and sharp. Selling? You think this is about money? Then what? Pierce demanded. Deterrence. Voss leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. Do you know what happens when our enemies think we're lying about our capabilities? They test us, push boundaries, start conflicts they think we can't win. So you decided to prove we have a super sniper by nearly starting a war. I decided to prove that Sergeant Nguyen exists and is operational, that the impossible shot isn't mythology. Voss's eyes burned with conviction. There are 7 conflicts brewing right now that might stay cold if certain parties believe we have someone who can reach out and touch them from 2 miles away. Patch shifted by the door. That's insane. Is it? Voss looked at him. How many fighters ran away today when they realized what she could do? How many lives did that save? You used civilians as bait, Pierce growled. I used a controlled scenario with multiple fail-safes. The clinic was never in real danger. Those technicals looked pretty real to me, Arya said. Mercenaries, paid to threaten not to kill. They had specific instructions. Voss grimaced. Until you started putting rounds through their equipment. That wasn't in the plan. Neither was painting my position for a foreign aircraft. I needed them to see you work, to document it, to believe it. Voss looked at Pierce. General, there's a meeting tomorrow. Unofficial back channel. Representatives from 9 nations discussing new rules of engagement for the next decade of warfare. They think we've been bluffing about our long-range capabilities. And you thought turning my sergeant into a circus act would convince them? I thought demonstrating her abilities under observation would prevent 3 wars and save thousands of lives. Voss slumped back. But it's more than that. Someone leaked Blackthorn. Someone's been selling information about our most classified operations. I staged this to draw them out. Arya and Pierce exchanged glances. You think there's a mole? Pierce said. I know there is. Only 7 people knew about the 3 200-meter shot. 3 are dead, 2 are in Washington, 1 is me. She looked at Arya. And 1 is you. You're suggesting Sergeant Nguyen leaked her own classified operation? No, but someone close to her might have. Someone with access to her records, her deployments, her capabilities. Voss's eyes swept the room. Someone on this base. The air conditioning cycled off, leaving the room in tense silence. Arya walked to the window, looking out at the base. The power fluctuations. They weren't random. No, Voss admitted. Each one corresponded to a data packet being transmitted. Someone was sending real-time intelligence about your shooting solutions. To whom? That's what I was trying to find out when you shot my phone. Pierce's secure phone rang. He answered, listened, his face growing darker with each word. When he hung up, his expression was granite. Captain Walsh is missing. Her quarters are empty. Her workstation has been wiped, and the last anyone saw her was 20 minutes ago heading for the motor pool. Patch straightened. Walsh? She's been here 3 years. She also had complete access to operational schedules, Pierce said. And she was the one monitoring all communications during the Ridge incident. Arya turned from the window. She knew exactly where I was, what I was shooting at, and how I was calculating the shots. We need to find her, Pierce said, reaching for his radio. No, Arya said quietly. We need to let her run. Everyone stared at her. Sergeant, she's a security breach. She's also our only link to whoever's buying the information. Arya looked at Voss. You wanted to draw out the mole. Let's finish the job. You want to use her as bait. I want to use myself as bait. She'll try to sell what she observed today. Real-time data on my shooting capabilities, my methods, my decision-making patterns. Arya picked up the shell casing from the table. Information like that would be worth millions to the right buyer. Or the wrong one, Patch added. Pierce considered this. You're suggesting we let her make contact with her handler. I'm suggesting we make it easier for her. Arya pulled out her phone, started typing. General, with your permission, I'd like to schedule another demonstration. Tomorrow. Something even more impossible than today. Such as moving target 3,500 meters through mirage and wind shear. She looked up. Something that would make today look like training wheels. Voss leaned forward. That's beyond the edge of possibility. Exactly. Which means whoever Walsh is selling to will have to be there in person to verify it. Arya set down her phone. We announce it on the channels we know are compromised. Set it up at range 12, the one with the elevated observation post. Where observers would have to expose themselves, Pierce said, understanding. It's a trap. It's a filter. Only someone with serious resources and intent would risk exposure for that intelligence. The lights flickered again, 3 short pulses. Arya's head snapped up. That's Morse code, SOS. They rushed to the window. In the motor pool, a figure was waving a flashlight, Captain Walsh surrounded by armed men in unmarked uniforms. It's not an extraction, Patch said. It's a kidnapping. Pierce grabbed his radio, but Arya stopped him. Wait, look at their positions. The men were arranged in a defensive perimeter, weapons facing outward. They weren't taking Walsh, they were protecting her from something. A shot cracked across the base. One of the unmarked soldiers fell. Sniper sim patch identified. North Tower about 400 meters from their position. Another shot. Another soldier down. Someone's cleaning house, Voss said quietly. Eliminating witnesses. Walsh was screaming now, trying to run, but the remaining soldiers held her back. They were dragging her toward a vehicle, using their bodies as shields. I need a rifle, Arya said. Pierce looked at her. That's 800 meters through reinforced glass. Not the sniper, the engine block of their escape vehicle. She was already moving. Patch, get to the armory, grab the first 338 you find. Meet me on the roof. Arya, you can't. She was already gone. Patch right behind her. Pierce turned to Voss. Who else knows about Walsh? If she's the mole, then her handler knows. And if her handler thinks she's been compromised, they'll eliminate her. They watched through the window as another unmarked soldier fell to the mystery sniper. Walsh was being dragged now, clearly terrified. On the radio, Arya's voice crackled, In position, no rifle yet. Patch is 60 seconds out, Pierce replied. Don't have 60 seconds. There was a pause. General, I need you to trust me. What are you planning? Psychology. Through the window, they saw Arya stand up on the roof, completely exposed. She had no weapon, just her hands raised to her eyes like she was looking through a scope. The mystery sniper's next shot went wide, striking concrete near Walsh's position. He's seen her, Voss breathed. He's hesitating. Arya remained standing, slowly tracking her invisible scope toward the North Tower. Her stance was perfect, the same position she'd used with the Barrett, minus the rifle. The sniper fired at her. The round passed close enough to snap the air by her head. Arya didn't flinch. She adjusted her imaginary aim slightly, then brought her right hand down in a trigger squeeze motion. The North Tower window exploded not from her shot, but from the sniper diving for cover, his own weapon discharging into the glass. How? Pierce asked. He thinks she has a weapon we can't see, Voss said, or a spotter with a rifle. He's panicking. Patch burst onto the roof carrying a Remington 700. He slid it across to Arya like a hockey puck. She dropped prone, had the rifle shouldered in less than 2 seconds. The escape vehicle was moving now, Walsh visible through the rear window. Arya fired once. The vehicle's front tire exploded. The driver lost control, the vehicle slewing sideways into a concrete barrier. The remaining guards pulled Walsh out, trying for another vehicle. The mystery sniper had recovered, was lining up another shot on Walsh. Arya swung her rifle to the North Tower. Through her scope, she could see him, a professional prone position, finger on the trigger. She had a choice. Take him out or save Walsh. She chose both. Her first shot struck the sniper's rifle, sending it spinning. Her second fired so fast it sounded like an echo struck the ground at Walsh's feet, causing her and the guards to dive for cover. The sniper, now disarmed, fled. The guards, confused and taking fire from an unknown position, abandoned Walsh and ran for their remaining vehicle. Walsh stood in the open, hands raised, looking up at the roof where Arya was positioned. Clear, Arya announced over the radio. Target is secure. Security forces swarmed the motor pool, taking Walsh into custody. She wasn't fighting. She looked relieved. 10 minutes later, they were back in the conference room. Walsh sat where Voss had been, tears streaming down her face. They said they'd kill my sister, she said. She's stationed in Seoul. They had photos of her apartment, her routine, everything. Who's they? Pierce asked, his voice gentler now. I don't know. It started 2 years ago. Small things, duty rosters, training schedules, nothing classified. Then it escalated. She looked at Arya. When you arrived, they became obsessed. They wanted everything about you. What did you give them? Schedules, ammunition requisitions, range bookings, nothing operational, I swear. Walsh wiped her eyes. Until today. They wanted real-time data on your shooting, said it was the last thing they'd ask for. But someone decided you were a liability, Voss said. Walsh nodded. The sniper, he wasn't part of the plan. Neither were those men protecting me. I don't know who they were. Arya and Patch exchanged glances. Third party, Patch said. Someone else is in play. Pierce's phone rang. He listened, then handed it to Arya. It's for you. She took it, listened. Her face gave away nothing, but her grip on the phone tightened. I understand, she said finally. Tomorrow, range 12, 1400 hours. She hung up and set the phone down carefully. Who was that? Pierce asked. Someone claiming to represent the people who tried to extract Walsh. They want to make a deal. What kind of deal? Arya looked at the shell casing still sitting on the table. They have the original Blackthorn files, the complete operation including the parts that were redacted even from JSOC. They're offering to trade them for a live demonstration of my capabilities. It's a trap, Patch said immediately. Obviously, but it's also an opportunity. Arya turned to Voss. You wanted to prove the 200-meter shot was real. They want to see if I can do it again. We both get what we want. And what do you want? Pierce asked. Arya was quiet for a moment, looking out at the base where soldiers were still running, still reacting to the morning's chaos. I want to know why that shot mattered so much that people are willing to kill for it 6 years later. I want to know what really happened in Kandahar. She looked at each of them in turn. And I want to know why everyone's so afraid of what I might be able to do next. The lights flickered one more time. Not a power issue, but the sun passing behind clouds, throwing the room into momentary shadow. When the light returned, Arya was loading the Remington's magazine each round, sliding home with a soft click. Tomorrow, range 12, she said. Let them come. Let them all come. You're really going to shoot 500 meters? Walsh asked, her voice small. No, Arya replied, and for the first time since the morning began, she smiled. It was a cold, predatory thing. I'm going to shoot further. Pierce felt a chill run down his spine. How much further? Far enough to make them understand that the badge isn't the limit of what I can do. She chambered around the action smooth as silk. It's just where I stopped counting. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. By tomorrow, the wind would be howling. The conditions would be impossible. Perfect, Arya thought, because impossible was exactly what she did best. The secure phone rang again. Pierce answered, his face immediately going pale. Sir, Patch asked. Pierce hung up slowly. That was JSOC. They're sending a team. Someone named Blackthorn has been activated. Everyone turned to look at Arya. That's not possible, she said quietly. Blackthorn was a one-time operation code. Apparently not, Pierce said. They'll be here in 6 hours. They want you ready for something they're calling Phase 2. Phase 2 of what? Pierce looked at the message he'd written while on the phone. Of something called Project North Star. Arya went very still. North Star was her call sign, but it was also something else. Something from before the 200-meter shot. Something that was supposed to stay buried. General, she said carefully. I need access to the secure communications room. Now. Why? Because if Project North Star has been activated, then this isn't about my shooting anymore. She stood the Remington still in her hands. It's about what they turned me into before I ever picked up a rifle. The room fell silent. Even Voss looked confused. What are you talking about? Pierce asked. Arya walked to the window, looking out at the gathering storm. The 200-meter shot wasn't the achievement, General. It was the test, to see if the modifications worked. What modifications? She turned to face them, and for the first time Pierce saw something in her eyes that wasn't calm confidence. It was fear. The ones that let me see wind patterns in dust motes, calculate trajectories in real time, feel barometric pressure changes in my bones. She set down the rifle. I'm not just a sniper, General. I'm a prototype. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, they heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching heavy ones, military coming in fast and low. When the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red, Arya was already moving. That's not JSOC, she said. JSOC would have filed a flight plan. Pierce grabbed his radio, but it was dead. All their communications were dead. Through the window, they could see the helicopters, black unmarked, settling onto the base's main landing pad. Figures in tactical gear were already dismounting, moving with professional precision toward the operations building. Extraction team, Patch identified. Coming for her. Or elimination team, Voss countered. Arya picked up the Remington again, checking the chamber. Doesn't matter. They're not taking me anywhere. Pierce drew his sidearm. We don't even know who they are. Yes, we do, Arya said quietly. They're the people who made me. And now they want their property back. The building's main door exploded inward. The game had changed. The hunters had become the hunted. And somewhere in the approaching storm, Arya could feel the wind shifting, carrying with it the scent of a war that had started with a single impossible shot and was about to end with something even more impossible. Her survival. The tactical team moved through the operations building like water through a broken dam fluid, fast and unstoppable. Arya counted footsteps in the hallway, calculating angles and distances, while Pierce barricaded the conference room door with everything they could move. The Remington 700 felt light in her hands, too light for what was coming. 7 operators, she said quietly. 2x2 coverage pattern, 1 floater. They'll breach in 40 seconds. Patch was already at the window, trying to force it open. Sealed, reinforced. We're not getting out this way. Walsh had backed herself into a corner, hands shaking. Voss, still in restraints, watched everything with calculating eyes. Generals here, Arya said, I need you to do exactly what I say when I say it. Pierce nodded, his sidearm ready, but knowing it would be like bringing a knife to an artillery fight. The footsteps stopped outside their door. Arya could hear breathing, controlled, professional. Then a voice amplified through a speaker. Staff Sergeant Nguyen, this is Colonel Marcus Reed, Project North Star. We're here to bring you home. Arya's jaw tightened. She knew that voice. Colonel Reed died in Kandahar same day as the 200-meter shot. Reports of my death were strategic. Open the door, Arya. We need to talk about what's happening to you. What's happening to me? The deterioration, the neural degradation. You've noticed it, haven't you? The headaches, the hypersensitivity to pressure changes. Your modifications are killing you. Pierce looked at Arya, who kept her expression neutral despite the truth in Reed's words. She had been feeling it, the constant ache behind her eyes, the way her bones seemed to vibrate before weather changes. I've got maybe 6 months, she said quietly to Pierce. Maybe less. Jesus, Patch breathed. But that's 6 months they don't get to use me, Arya added louder, making sure Reed heard. We can help you, Reed continued. The new version of the treatment, it's more stable. You could have years, decades even. At what cost? Does it matter? You're dying either way. Arya moved to the door, standing just to the side where she couldn't be targeted through the wood. Tell me about Blackthorn, the real version. There was a pause. You already know. The target wasn't a nuclear scientist. Pierce's face went white. What? It was one of ours, Reed said. Another prototype like you, but he went rogue, started selling his abilities. The 200-meter shot wasn't just to eliminate him, it was to prove that we could control our assets even at impossible distances. And now I'm the rogue asset, Arya said. No, you're the success story, but only if you come with us now. The lights flickered, not power failure, but flashbangs being prepped in the hallway. Arya recognized the electromagnetic signature, the way it made her modified neurons tingle. Down! She shouted, diving behind the heavy conference table. The door exploded inward, followed by 3 flashbangs. Even with her eyes closed and covered, Arya's enhanced sensitivity made it feel like staring into the sun. But she'd trained for this, learned to navigate by sound and air pressure alone. She came up firing. The Remington barked once, and the lead operator's weapon flew from his hands, the stock shattered. Her second shot took out the overhead light, plunging the room into shadow and emergency red. Patch had his M4 up, laying down suppressing fire, while Pierce dragged Walsh behind cover. Voss, still restrained, had rolled under the table, making herself as small as possible. The tactical team flowed in, but Arya was already moving. She'd mapped the room in her mind, every angle, every surface. She put a round through the window, not to escape, but to create a pressure differential. The sudden wind shift told her exactly where each operator was positioned. "Contact left," one shouted, but Arya was already right using Patch as a pivot point. Her next shot struck an operator's knee pad, not penetrating, but causing him to stumble. Pierce's sidearm found center mass, the operator's armor absorbing the impact, but knocking him back. It was chaos, but calculated chaos. Arya moved through it like a conductor through a symphony, each shot perfectly timed, each movement flowing into the next. Then Reed entered the room, and everything changed. He moved differently than the others, smoother, faster. Another prototype, Arya realized. Another one like her. Their eyes met across the chaos, and she saw her own enhancements reflected in his gaze, the dilated pupils that could process light differently, the micro-tremors that let them feel air currents, the unnatural stillness that came from perfect body control. "Stand down," Reed commanded, and his team immediately disengaged, falling back to defensive positions. Arya kept the Remington trained on him, but she could see him calculating trajectories just like she did, finding the angles where her shot would miss by millimeters. "You can't hit me," he said simply. "Not at this range. I can see the bullet paths just like you can." "Want to bet?" She fired, but not at him. The round struck the fire suppression pipe above his head. Water exploded downward, and in that moment of distraction, Arya moved. But Reed moved too, intercepting her path. They collided in the center of the room, and it was like watching 2 hurricanes meet. Every strike was countered, every move anticipated. They weren't just fighting, they were calculating, processing thousands of micro-decisions per second. Pierce tried to get a clear shot, but couldn't. They were moving too fast, too fluidly. Then Walsh did something unexpected. She grabbed Voss's restraints and used them to trip Reed just for a second. It was enough. Arya's knee found his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, she brought the Remington stock down on the base of his skull. Reed crumpled. "Move!" Arya commanded, already heading for the blown door. They ran into the hallway, but more operators were coming, dozens of them, flooding the building. "Roof," Arya said, reversing direction. "There's another way." They climbed Patch, covering their rear, Pierce half-carrying Walsh, who was on the edge of panic. Voss, freed from her restraints in the chaos, followed without complaint. The roof access door was locked. Arya shot the mechanism apart and kicked it open. Wind immediately howled through the storm had arrived early, bringing sheets of rain and gusts that could knock a person off their feet. On the landing pad below, the black helicopter's rotors were still spinning. More operators were dismounting, setting up a perimeter. "We're trapped," Walsh said. "No," Arya said, studying the wind patterns in the rain. "We're exactly where we need to be." She pulled out her phone, somehow still functioning despite the water, and made a call. "North Star Actual," she said. "Execute Contingency 7. Pierce stared at her. "What's Contingency 7? Something I arranged while you were barricading the door." She pointed to the horizon where lights were appearing, vehicles approaching fast. "The QRF isn't the only unit loyal to you, General." The vehicles were strikers from the armored division, and they weren't slowing down. They smashed through the base's perimeter fence and opened fire on the black helicopters with their mounted weapons. "You called in the cavalry," Patch said, grinning despite the situation. "I called in a distraction," Arya corrected. She was assembling something from her pack, a modular rifle system she'd grabbed from the conference room debris. Not the Remington, something else. "The real cavalry is about to arrive." Thunder cracked overhead, but it wasn't from the storm. A Predator drone passed overhead so low they could see its sensor pod swiveling. "That's not one of ours," Pierce said. "No." Arya agreed. "It's mine." The drone fired, but not at them. Its Hellfire missile struck the building's main power transformer. The entire base plunged into darkness, except for emergency lighting and muzzle flashes. In the chaos, Reed's voice came over a loudspeaker. "Arya, you just declared war on your own government." "No," she called back, her voice carrying over the storm. "I declared war on whoever perverted Project North Star. There's a difference." She finished assembling the rifle, a Chaytak M200 intervention, the rifle that had made the 3 200-meter shot. "You brought it with you," Pierce said. "I never go anywhere without it." She was loading a magazine with very specific rounds, custom loads, with her name literally etched on each bullet. "General, there's something you need to know about Kandahar." "Now really, now because in about 30 seconds, I'm going to do something that will either validate everything or get us all killed." She chambered around, the action smooth despite the rain. The target in Kandahar wasn't a rogue prototype. It was the project director. He was going to sell the enhancement process to the highest bidder. "So they had you kill him?" "No. They had me stop him. The shot was non-lethal through the shoulder, destroyed his briefcase with all the data, but he survived." She looked at Pierce. "Colonel Reed was supposed to extract him. Instead, Reed killed him and took the data himself." Reed's the rogue element. Reed's the evolution. He used the data to enhance himself, then came back for more prototypes. That's what this is really about. He's building an army of enhanced shooters. Lightning illuminated the base, and in that strobe light moment they could see Reed emerging onto a lower roof, his own long rifle in hand. "He's going to take the shot," Patch said. "Let him," Arya replied, settling into her shooting position, despite the wind trying to tear her off the roof. Reed's rifle fired. The bullet came so close to Arya's head that it parted her hair, but she didn't flinch. She was reading the wind through his shot, understanding the exact conditions through the bullet's path. "My turn," she whispered. She fired, but not at Reed. Her shot went high, impossibly high, arcing through the storm like a prayer to physics. Reed laughed over the loudspeaker. "You missed by 30 feet, did I?" Arya was already chambering another round. Her first shot struck a radio antenna on the far side of the base, severing a critical relay cable. All of Reed's communications died instantly. "Lucky shot," Reed called out, but his voice had lost some confidence. Arya fired again. This time the round struck a weather vane 2,000 meters away, spinning it so violently it created a sound like a siren. Every operator in the base turned to look. She's showing off, Voss said, understanding. No, Pierce corrected, seeing what Arya was doing. She's teaching. Each shot was a lesson in impossible ballistics. She put a round through a window and 500 meters away, the bullet passing through without breaking the glass, only possible by matching the exact resonant frequency of the pain. She struck a flagpole at 200 meters, her bullet cutting the rope, so the flag fell perfectly into a puddle that spelled out NO in the splash pattern. This is impossible, Walsh breathed. No one can calculate all those variables in these conditions. She's not calculating, Pierce said, watching Arya's eyes. She's feeling them. The modifications didn't just enhance her vision and reflexes, they gave her something else. What? Intuition multiplied by mathematics. She doesn't solve the equation, she becomes it. Reed fired again, this time a burst of 3 shots. Arya rolled left, came up in a different position, and fired once. Her bullet struck Reed's rifle barrel. Not the action, not the stock, the barrel itself, at exactly the point where metal fatigue from his rapid shots had created a microscopic weakness. The barrel split like overripe fruit. Reed threw the destroyed weapon aside and pulled a pistol, but Arya was already moving. She ran along the roof's edge, the wind trying to throw her off, firing as she went. Each shot struck something specific, a door lock here, a vehicle tire there, creating a pattern of destruction that herded Reed's team into a specific area. The motor pool, Patch realized. She's driving them into the motor pool, where the strikers were waiting. Reed realized it too, tried to redirect his men, but without comms, and with Arya's shots creating walls of deterrence, they had nowhere to go, but where she wanted them. Then she did something that made everyone stop. She stood up, fully exposed rifle at her side, and looked directly at Reed across the distance. "Kandahar," she called out, her voice carrying over the storm. 200 meters. You want to see it? Watch." She brought the rifle up in one smooth motion and fired without seeming to aim. The shot went long over Reed, over the base, out into the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in the distance, an explosion. A fuel depot, 3 miles away, erupted in flames, the one that intelligence had been monitoring for suspicious activity. That's over 4,000 meters, Walsh said. 4,127, Arya corrected, with a 17-meter-per-second crosswind and a 200-foot elevation drop. She chambered another round, aimed at Reed. "Your move, Colonel." Reed stood there, rain streaming off his enhanced form, calculating. Then he smiled. "You know what the problem with perfect shots is, Arya? Enlighten me. They only work if you're willing to take them." He pulled something from his vest, a detonator. "Building 7, the medical center. 3 pounds of C4 right under the ICU. Pierce's face went white. "There are 40 patients in there. And Arya can stop me or save them, not both." Reed's thumb hovered over the trigger. "What's it going to be, North Star? The perfect shot that ends this, or the humanity that makes you weak?" Arya's rifle never wavered. Through her scope, she could see Reed's pulse in his throat, the micro-expressions that would telegraph when he would actually press the trigger. But she could also feel something else, the vibration through the building's structure. The C4 was real. 10 seconds, Reed said. "Decide." Arya made her choice. She swung her rifle away from Reed toward Building 7. An impossible target she couldn't see. The bomb couldn't even see the building clearly through the storm, but she could feel it through the enhanced perception the modifications had given her. She fired. The bullet punched through rain and wind, through a window, through an interior wall, and struck the blasting cap on the C4, with just enough force to damage it without triggering it. The bomb didn't explode. Reed pressed his trigger. Nothing. Impossible, he breathed. That's what they said about 200 meters, Arya replied, swinging her rifle back to him. But Reed was already running his enhanced speed, carrying him faster than any normal human could move. His team scattered, using smoke grenades and suppressing fire to cover their retreat to the helicopters. We can't let them leave, Pierce said. We don't have to, Arya said. She pulled out her phone again, hit another number. The Predator drone reappeared, but this time it wasn't alone. 3 more drones flanked it, all armed, all locked onto the black helicopters. How? Pierce asked. Colonel Voss wasn't the only one with foreign contacts, Arya said. But mine are the ones who want Reed stopped as much as we do. The lead helicopter tried to take off. A Hellfire missile convinced it to reconsider exploding just close enough to damage the rotor without destroying the aircraft. Reed! Arya called out. It's over! Stand down! Through the rain, they could see him standing by the grounded helicopter looking up at them. Even at this distance, Arya could see him making the same calculations she would make. The odds, the angles, the possibilities. He raised his hands in surrender, but Arya knew better. She could see the micro-movements, the telltale signs of enhancement. He was planning something. Patch, she said quietly. When I say run, everybody goes for the stairwell. What are you? Reed's hand moved almost too fast to see. Not for a weapon, but for something on his belt. A flare gun modified, loaded with something that burned too bright to be normal. He fired it straight up. Marking round, Arya identified. For a kinetic strike. Pierce's eyes widened. From orbit. Project Thor. Tungsten rods dropped from satellites. We have maybe 90 seconds. The whole base will be gone. Arya was already moving, but not toward the stairs, toward the edge of the roof. Get everyone to the bunkers, the old ones from Desert Storm. They're the only things that might survive. What about you? She looked back, rain streaming down her face, and smiled. I'm going to do what I do best. The impossible. She jumped. Not down across. The gap between buildings was 15 feet, impossible for a normal person in these conditions. But Arya wasn't normal anymore. She landed hard-rolled, came up running. The Chaytak was still in her hands. Behind her, she could hear Pierce and the others running for the bunkers, Patch's voice on the radio warning the entire base. Ahead of her, Reed was moving too, his enhanced speed carrying him toward something. Not escape, he knew that was impossible now. He was heading for the communications building. Arya understood. He was going to transmit the North Star data before the kinetic strike. Upload everything about the enhancement process to whoever was backing him. She had to stop him, but she was 800 meters away, and he had a 30-second head start. So she did the only thing she could do. She stopped running, knelt in the middle of the storm, and brought up the Chaytak. One shot. Through rain that was falling sideways, wind that was gusting to 30 meters per second, at a moving target she could barely see. The kind of shot that had started all of this. The kind of shot that might end it. She felt the wind not with her skin, but with something deeper. The pressure changes sang in her bones, the electromagnetic variations from the approaching tungsten rod painted patterns in her vision. Every enhancement, every modification, every impossible ability focused into this one moment. Time slowed. She could see the bullet's path before she fired it, a golden thread through the chaos, bending and twisting, but ultimately true. She could feel Reed's movement pattern his enhanced muscles, following predictable optimization patterns. She could even sense the tungsten rod far above beginning its descent. 60 seconds to impact. She fired. The bullet flew through the storm like destiny itself. It curved around raindrops, rode wind currents, like a surfer on waves, accelerated and decelerated in microscopic adjustments that shouldn't be possible. Reed was reaching for the door handle of the communications building when the bullet arrived. It struck the nerve cluster in his shoulder, the exact spot Arya had memorized from their brief fight. Not lethal, but instantly paralyzing to his arm. His hand spasmed, dropping the data drive he'd been carrying. He turned. Even at that distance, she could see his enhanced eyes finding her through the storm. He smiled and reached for the drive with his other hand. Arya was already chambering her second round. This one took him in the other shoulder. Same nerve cluster, same effect. Both arms useless, Reed fell to his knees in the rain. 40 seconds to impact. Arya ran, not away from the strike zone, but toward it, toward Reed. She reached him with 20 seconds left, found him laughing despite the pain. "You can't carry me to the bunkers," he said. "Not in time. We both die here." "No," Arya said. She pulled something from her vest, an injector filled with amber fluid. "We both live." "The counteragent that'll destroy the enhancements. I know." She injected herself first, feeling the modifications beginning to burn out of her system. The hypersensitivity faded, the calculated perfection dissolving into normal human chaos. Then she injected Reed. "Why?" he gasped as his enhancements failed. "Because I'm not a weapon," Arya said. "I'm a soldier, and soldiers save lives." 10 seconds. She couldn't carry him, but she could drag him. Not to the bunkers too far. But there was a drainage culvert, reinforced concrete, just deep enough. 5 seconds. They tumbled into it together, Arya pulling Reed down as far as she could. 2 seconds. She looked up and saw it, a star falling in reverse, bright as the sun. Impact. The world ended and began again in light and thunder. The kinetic strike vaporized the communications building, sending a shockwave that flattened everything within 200 meters. The drainage culvert cracked concrete dust filling the air, but it held. When the ringing in her ears stopped, Arya found herself partially buried in debris. Reed unconscious beside her. She could hear sirens' voices, the sounds of rescue. But more importantly, she could hear normally, see normally, feel normally. The enhancements were gone. She pulled herself free, checked Reed's pulse alive, and climbed out of the culvert. The base was devastation. Where the communications building had been was now a crater, but the bunkers had held. She could see people emerging, Pierce among them, Patch supporting Walsh. The black helicopters were gone, destroyed in the strike. Reed's team had either fled or surrendered. It was over. Pierce reached her first, looking at the destruction, then at Reed's unconscious form. "The data?" he asked. Arya held up the drive Reed had dropped, melted, destroyed. "Gone. All of it. And the enhancements." She looked at her hands, steady but no longer superhumanly so. "Also gone. I'm just a regular sniper now." Patch laughed, harsh but genuine. "Regular? You just made 2 impossible shots in a hurricane, then survived a kinetic strike. That's not regular." "That's North Star," Pierce corrected. He looked at the destroyed base, the crater where secrets had been buried. "What do we tell them, JSOC, the Pentagon, everyone who's going to want answers?" Arya picked up the Che-Tac. Its scope cracked, but the rifle intact. "Tell them the truth. That Project North Star was compromised, that Colonel Reed went rogue, and that a staff sergeant with a good eye stopped him. They'll want to restart the program, create new prototypes." "Let them try," Arya said. She tapped her temple. The real enhancement was never the modifications. It was learning to see the impossible as merely improbable. Voss approached no longer in restraints, her intelligence credentials apparently solid despite everything. The foreign observers recorded everything. The storm shots the counter-sniper work all of it. Good, Arya said. Let them know that America's long-range capability doesn't come from enhancement programs or super soldiers. It comes from training dedication and the willingness to take the hard shots. And the 200-meter badge? Voss asked. Still want to wear it? Arya touched the bronze badge somehow still attached to her torn uniform. Every day. Not as a boast, but as a reminder. Of what? That the impossible is just what we haven't done yet. Sirens were approaching medical military investigative. Soon the base would be swarming with officials demanding explanations. But for now, in the rain, beside a crater that had held terrible secrets, a sniper without enhancements stood with her team and looked at the dawn breaking through the storm clouds. So? Patch said, breaking the silence. What's your maximum range now? Without the modifications? Arya smiled, raising the damaged Che-tac to her shoulder, sighting through the cracked scope at something in the distance. Want to find out? She fired one last shot, the rifle's bark echoing across the destroyed base. 3,000 meters away on the highest point of the surrounding hills, a flag that had been placed by Reed's advance team fell cut free by a perfect shot. Still impossible, Pierce said quietly. No, sir? Arya corrected, lowering the rifle. Just very, very difficult. The rain was stopping. The war was over, and somewhere in the Pentagon, officials were already debating what to do about a sergeant who had proven that human capability pushed to its limits could exceed any enhancement. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, Arya Nguyen stood in the ruins of a program that had tried to make her more than human and proved that being human was enough. More than enough. It was extraordinary. The medical tent smelled of antiseptic and burnt metal, a combination that made Arya's stomach turn even without her enhanced senses. She sat on the examination table while a medic checked her eyes with a pen light, looking for signs of concussion from the kinetic strike. Through the tent's open flap, she could see the crater still smoking, the devastation spreading outward like ripples in water. Follow the light, the medic instructed, but Arya's attention was on General Pierce arguing with someone on a satellite phone just outside. I don't care what the Joint Chiefs want, Pierce was saying, his voice carrying despite his attempt at discretion. Sergeant Nguyen is not a lab rat. The enhancement program is dead and Reed is in custody. That's the end of it. But Arya knew better. Programs like North Star didn't end, they evolved, went deeper underground, found new test subjects. She touched the spot on her arm where the counteragent had been injected. The burning sensation had faded, but she could still feel the absence of what she'd lost, like a phantom limb. Your vitals are normal, the medic said, stepping back. Remarkably normal considering what you've been through. Just human, Arya replied, the words tasting strange in her mouth. The medic left, and Patch entered his arm in a sling from their escape. We've got a problem, he said without preamble. Reed's awake and talking. Let him talk. He's got nothing left to bargain with. That's just it, he does. He says there's another prototype out there, someone who didn't get caught in the roundup. Arya's blood went cold. Who? He won't say. Not unless he gets a deal. But Arya, Patch lowered his voice. He said this one makes you look like an amateur. Enhanced, further trained, longer. And they're already operational. Before Arya could respond, an explosion rocked the base. Not another kinetic strike, this was closer, smaller. Mortar fire. Incoming, someone shouted, and then the world erupted in chaos again. Arya rolled off the examination table as another mortar round struck nearby, shredding the tent wall. Through the tear, she could see the perimeter and the muzzle flashes of an attacking force. "How did they get this close?" Patch demanded, pulling his sidearm with his good hand. Arya grabbed a rifle from a weapons rack, checked the magazine. Standard M4, nothing special, but it would have to do. "They didn't get close. They were already here." Pierce burst into the damaged tent. "It's a prisoner extraction. They're after Reed." Of course they were. Someone wanted the last prototype with intact enhancements, the last repository of North Star data. Arya did the math. The attacking force's position, the location of the detention facility where Reed was being held, the time they'd need. "They're not trying to extract him," she said. "They're going to kill him. Dead men tell no tales about illegal enhancement programs." "Then we need to move him." "No." Arya was already moving rifle in hand. "We need to use him." She ran through the chaos of the base mortars still falling, but now she had to calculate trajectories the old-fashioned way, experience and instinct, rather than enhanced perception. A round impacted 20 meters to her left. She'd have felt it coming with the modifications, could have predicted exactly where. Now she just had to hope her natural skills were enough. The detention facility was a hardened structure, but she could see attackers converging on it. They moved like Reed's team had too smooth, too coordinated. Enhanced operators. "More prototypes," she breathed. She took position behind a destroyed vehicle sighting through the M4's basic optics. The first shot would tell her everything, whether she could still shoot without the enhancements, whether years of training meant anything against superhuman capability. An attacker emerged from cover, moving faster than any normal human should. Arya led him calculated based on memory rather than enhanced perception, and fired. The shot went wide. The attacker turned toward her, his own weapon coming up with inhuman speed. Arya dove as bullets shredded her cover, rolling behind a concrete barrier. "I can't match them," she said into her radio. "Not anymore. They're too fast, too precise." "Fall back," Pierce ordered. "Negative. I have an idea." She looked at the detention facility, counted the attackers. "Patch, you still have those flashbangs from the armory." "3 of them. But Arya, they'll see them coming." "Not if they're focused on something else. Get to the north wall of detention. Wait for my signal." She couldn't outshoot enhanced operators, but she could outthink them. They'd been trained to rely on their modifications, to trust their superhuman senses. That was their weakness. Arya fired 3 shots in rapid succession, not at the attackers, but at a fuel barrel near their position. It didn't explode, she couldn't make that precise shot anymore, but it started leaking. The enhanced operators would smell it immediately, their heightened senses making it overwhelming. They shifted position, moving away from the leak directly into Patch's throwing range. "Now!" Arya called. The flashbangs arced through the air. The enhanced operators saw them coming, but they were already committed to their movement, and their enhanced vision, more sensitive to light, made the flashbangs devastating. They stumbled blinded, and Arya moved. Not with superhuman speed, but with human determination. Her shots weren't perfect anymore, but they didn't need to be. Center mass basic marksmanship, the fundamentals she'd learned before anyone had ever mentioned Project North Star. 3 attackers down, but more were coming. Inside the detention facility, she could hear gunfire. They'd breached. Arya ran for the entrance, found it blown open. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. She could hear voices, Reed's among them. "You're too late," he was saying to someone. She already destroyed the data. "We don't need the data," a female voice replied. Cold professional. "We have you." Arya rounded the corner and froze. The woman standing over Reed was a mirror image, same height, same build, even similar features. but her eyes were different. Still enhanced pupils dilated that inhuman stillness that came with the modifications. "Sister Protocol," Reed said, seeing Arya. "They made you in pairs. One public, one shadow. You were the test case, Arya. She's the production model." The other woman, Arya, couldn't think of her as anything but shadow, turned smoothly, her weapon already rising. Even without enhancements, Arya could see she was outmatched. Shadow moved like Arya used to move, saw like Arya used to see. "The famous North Star," Shadow said. "The 200-meter shot. Impressive for a prototype." "I'm not a prototype anymore," Arya replied, keeping her rifle steady despite knowing she couldn't win a quick-draw contest. "No, you're obsolete." Shadow's finger tightened on the trigger. Reed laughed, blood running from a cut on his head. "You still don't get it, do you, neither of you? The enhancement isn't what made the shot possible." Both women glanced at him just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Arya didn't try to shoot Shadow, she shot the overhead light fixture. The detention facility plunged into absolute darkness. In the black, Shadow had every advantage. Enhanced vision that could use minimal light, perfect spatial memory, heightened hearing. But she also had a weakness she'd never learned to fight without those advantages. Arya had. In sniper school before North Star, they'd trained blindfolded, learning to shoot by sound, by instinct, by pure muscle memory. She dropped to the floor as Shadow's shots passed overhead, rolled left, came up in a position she'd held 1,000 times. The M4 felt like an extension of her arms, its weight familiar and comforting. Shadow was moving. Arya could hear her enhanced muscles working the slight whisper of tactical gear. But enhanced hearing worked both ways. Arya pulled a pen from her pocket and threw it into the far corner. Shadow reacted instantly, superhuman reflexes sending rounds toward the sound. And in that muzzle flash, Arya saw everything she needed. She fired twice. Once to Shadow's weapon, destroying it. Once to her leg, dropping her to a knee. The lights flickered back on emergency power cycling. Shadow was down but not out, her hand moving toward a secondary weapon with enhanced speed. Arya was faster not physically, but mentally. She'd already calculated where the weapon would be standard tactical positioning. Her boot found Shadow's wrist, pinning it, while the M4's barrel found Shadow's throat. "Yield," Arya said quietly. Shadow's enhanced eyes calculated angles, distances, possibilities. Then she smiled. "You've lost the gifts. You're just human now." "I was always human. That's what made me dangerous." Pierce and his security team flooded in, weapons drawn. Shadow was restrained, her enhancements meaning nothing against multiple rifles and nowhere to run. Reed was laughing again, manic now. "You think you've won? There are 12 more. 12 Shadows, 12 enhanced operators already deployed around the world. You stopped one." "Where?" Pierce demanded. "Everywhere. Moscow, Beijing, London, Jerusalem." Reed's eyes were wild. "The program wasn't just ours. We sold it, traded it. Every major power has their own North Star now." Arya felt the weight of it, what she'd been part of, what she'd helped create. The 200-meter shot hadn't just proved American capability. It had started an arms race, but with human weapons instead of nuclear ones. "We can stop them," Pierce said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "How?" Reed asked. "They're ghosts, perfect snipers who can make impossible shots. How do you defend against someone who can kill from 2 miles away?" Arya set down the M4, walked to where the Chetak was propped against the wall, damaged but functional. She picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. "You teach others to do the same," she said, "without enhancements." Everyone stared at her. The modifications are a crutch, she continued. They make you rely on superhuman senses instead of human skill. I made the 3 200-meter shot because of training experience and understanding. The enhancements just made it easier, but easy isn't better. She looked at Shadow, who was being led away. How many shots have you made past 2,000 meters? Shadow didn't answer, but her silence was telling. 1-2 all in perfect conditions with your enhancements doing the work. Arya shook her head. I've made dozens, in rain, snow, sandstorms, because I learned to shoot before I learned to be superhuman. Walsh entered the detention facility, a tablet in her hand. General, you need to see this. Intelligence intercepts from the last hour. Pierce read his face, darkening. 3 long-range assassinations. Moscow, Tel Aviv, and London. All confirmed enhanced operators. It's starting, Reed said. The Shadow War. Enhanced versus enhanced until someone breaks the stalemate with something worse. Arya was already moving, heading for the door. Where are you going? Pierce called. The range. If we're going to counter 12 enhanced snipers, I need to train their replacements. She paused at the doorway. Natural replacements. Humans who can make impossible shots through skill, not modification. That'll take years, Patch said. Then we'd better start now. But as she walked toward the range, Arya heard something that made her stop. A sonic crack, distant but distinctive. A shot fired from extreme range. Everyone dove for cover, but no impact came. The shot had missed, or hadn't been aimed at them. Arya's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but she recognized the syntax, the formal precision. Another Shadow, one of the 12. Kark Plateau, 72 hours. Let's see if the legend is real without her gifts. A challenge. Shadow versus natural enhancement versus skill. You're not going, Pierce said, reading over her shoulder. I have to. It's the only way to prove that humans don't need to be enhanced to be exceptional. She looked at the destroyed base, the crater where North Star's secrets had burned. And maybe the only way to end this before it really begins. Voss stepped forward. It's a trap. Obviously. But it's also an opportunity. Arya pulled up satellite imagery on Walsh's tablet. Kark Plateau. Minimal cover, extreme elevation winds that can gust to 30 meters per second. The worst possible conditions for precision shooting. Exactly why you shouldn't go. Exactly why I have to. If I can beat an enhanced sniper there in those conditions without modifications. She looked at each of them. Then maybe the world realizes that the enhancement program is unnecessary. That human capability properly trained is enough. Pierce was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you need? Time to prepare. A spotter, I trust. She looked at Patch. And permission to do something incredibly stupid. Granted, Pierce said immediately. All of it. Patch grinned despite everything. Kark Plateau, where you supposedly made a 900-meter shot through a hurricane. I did make it, Arya corrected. But that was with enhancements. This time it'll be harder, Patch finished. Good. I was getting bored with possible. 3 days. 72 hours to prepare for a duel that would determine whether the future of warfare belonged to enhanced super soldiers or trained humans. Whether Project North Star had been humanity's evolution or its corruption. Arya walked to the range, the Chetak heavy in her hands, and set up at the 1,000-meter mark. A modest distance by her standards, but she had to rebuild from basics, relearn her capabilities without the crutch of enhancement. She settled behind the rifle, found her natural position, and looked through the scope. No superhuman clarity, no ability to see wind patterns in dust. Just glass light and experience. The target looked impossibly far. She smiled. Impossible was exactly where she needed to start. The shot rang out across the base, and 1,000 meters away, the target registered a perfect center hit. "One down," she said to herself. 11,999 to go. Because that's what it would take, 12,000 perfect shots to counter 12 enhanced shadows. And she had 70 hours to prove that human determination could match superhuman capability. The wind was picking up, bringing the smell of rain. Perfect. She needed to practice in the worst conditions, prepare for Kark's notorious weather. Another shot, another hit. Behind her, others were gathering. Soldiers who'd heard about the morning's events, about the sergeant who'd given up superhuman abilities to remain human. They watched her shoot, studied her technique, began to understand what she was trying to prove. "Can you teach us?" a young corporal asked. A sniper barely qualified, holding his own rifle uncertainly. Arya looked at him, then at the others gathering. A dozen soldiers, maybe more, coming. "Get on the line," she said. "All of you, let's see what humans can do." They lined up beside her, rifles ready. The range officers scrambled to set up additional targets. "First lesson," Arya said, not looking up from her scope. "Forget everything you think you know about limits. They're just boundaries no one's crossed yet." She fired again. Another perfect hit, this time at 1,200 meters. Second lesson, the enhancement isn't in the modification. It's in the mind that refuses to accept impossible. The other shooters began firing, most missing, some hitting, but all trying. Patch arrived with equipment, started setting up wind sensors and calculating displays. "For the Kark challenge," he explained. "If we're going to beat enhancement with skill, we need data." "No," Arya said. "We need instinct informed by data. The enhancement operators trust their modifications completely. That's their weakness. They've forgotten how to doubt, how to adjust when their senses might be wrong. And you haven't." She fired at 1,500 meters, now the shot more difficult, but still successful. Doubt is human. It makes us check our work, verify our calculations, adapt when things go wrong. The enhanced operators don't doubt, they know, and what you know can blind you to what is. More soldiers were arriving. Word had spread about the sniper who'd survived a kinetic strike, stopped an enhanced kill team, and was now preparing to face another superhuman operator with nothing but skill. General Pierce walked among them, and instead of ordering them back to duties, he picked up a rifle himself. "Show me," he said to Arya. She did. For the next 3 hours, she taught. Not just marksmanship, but philosophy. The idea that human limitation was just uninvested potential. That every impossible shot was possible to someone who refused to accept impossibility. By sunset, the range was full. 50 shooters, all trying to push past their limits. Most were failing, but some were beginning to understand. "It's not about the distance," Arya told them as darkness fell. "It's about the decision. The choice to take a shot everyone says you'll miss. The willingness to fail until you succeed." She switched to night shooting, using only ambient light. Harder without enhanced vision, but not impossible. Nothing was impossible. At midnight, Walsh brought news. "The shadow in Kark, we've identified her. Codename Polaris. She's credited with 17 impossible shots in the last year, all enhanced assisted." Just 17. Arya had made more than that today, alone rebuilding her skills. She's undertrained, relying too much on the modifications. She also has backup. Satellite shows a full team positioning around the plateau. Of course she does. She's afraid. Of you, of what I represent. Proof that she's unnecessary. Arya finally stood, stretching muscles that had been locked in shooting positions for hours. "How many rounds have I fired today?" Patch checked his count. 837. "Not enough. I need to be perfect at 3,000 meters without enhancement before facing someone who can do it with. She loaded another magazine. We continue. Through the night, she shot. Others came and went, but Arya remained rebuilding herself shot by shot. By dawn, she'd fired over 2,000 rounds, each one teaching her something about shooting without superhuman senses. Her groups were tightening, her distances increasing. At 500 meters, she was hitting consistently not perfect, but good enough to prove the point. Pierce returned with coffee and news. The international community is watching. They know about the Kark challenge. If you lose, the enhancement arms race accelerates. Every nation rushes to create their own super soldiers. Arya accepted the coffee gratefully. And if I win, maybe we prove that humanity doesn't need to be upgraded, that skill and determination are enough. Maybe isn't good enough. She set down the coffee, returned to the rifle. It has to be decisive, undeniable. You're exhausted. You need rest before. I need practice. Polaris has had her enhancements for years. I've had 60 hours to relearn how to be human. She settled behind the scope again. Every shot counts. The second day blended into the first. Arya barely slept, taking 20-minute naps between shooting sessions. Her shoulder was bruised from the rifle's recoil, her eyes strained from the scope, but she continued. Others continued with her. The young corporal who'd asked for training was now hitting at 1,800 meters. Not impossible, but improbable for someone of his experience. He was learning what Arya taught, that limits were negotiable. Why? Voss asked, watching the growing crowd of shooters. Why are they all trying? Because she's showing them it's possible, Patch answered. Every enhanced operator is proof that humans aren't enough, but every shot Arya makes is proof that we are. On the morning of the third day, with 12 hours until the Kark challenge, Arya finally stopped shooting. She'd fired over 4,000 rounds, her natural shooting rebuilt and refined. Final distance, Pierce asked. 3,100 meters, consistent hits in variable wind. She looked exhausted, but satisfied. Not my best, but good enough. Good enough to beat an enhanced operator? We'll find out. She began packing the Chetak, each movement precise, despite her fatigue. But win or lose, we've already proved something. She gestured to the range where dozens of shooters were still practicing pushing their own limits. We've proved that impossible is a choice. You can choose to accept it, or you can choose to shoot anyway. A helicopter was waiting fueled and ready for the flight to Kark Plateau. As Arya walked toward it, the shooters on the range stopped watching. Then, one by one, they began to applaud. Not for what she'd done, but for what she was about to attempt. A human facing a superhuman. Skill against enhancement. The past against the future. You know, Patch said as they boarded the helicopter. This is probably stupid. Probably, Arya agreed. We're outmatched, outgunned, and walking into a trap. Definitely. And Polaris has every advantage enhancement preparation choosing the ground. All true. Patch grinned. Perfect. I was worried this might be easy. The helicopter lifted off, turning toward Kark Plateau. Below the range was still active shooters attempting distances they'd never dreamed of before. Each shot fired in defiance of limitation. Each hit proving that humanity didn't need to be enhanced. It just needed to remember that impossible was a word, not a law. And in 12 hours on a plateau, where the wind howled and the distance mocked human capability, Arya would take the shot that would prove it to the world. Or die trying. But dying was just another limit. And she'd stopped believing in those 3 days ago, when she'd chosen to remain human in a world demanding she be more. The helicopter flew toward Kark, toward a challenge that would define the future of human warfare. In her hands, the Chetak was warm from 3 days of constant use. It felt like home. It felt like hope. It felt possible. The helicopter touched down on Kark Plateau, just as dawn broke across the mountainous terrain, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Arya stepped out into wind that immediately tried to knock her sideways, not the gentle breeze of the training range, but the kind of chaotic gusts that made long-range shooting a conversation with chaos itself. "Jesus," Patch muttered, holding onto his equipment bag, as a gust nearly sent him tumbling. "This is worse than the reports suggested." Arya knelt, letting dirt run through her fingers, feeling the texture, the temperature. Without her enhancements, she couldn't sense the micro-pressure changes, couldn't see the wind patterns in the dust. But she could remember. Years of shooting had taught her to read nature's tells the old-fashioned way. "She's already here," Arya said, scanning the ridgeline opposite their position. 3 kilometers away, maybe more the perfect distance for an enhanced sniper to demonstrate superiority. "How do you know?" "Because that's where I'd be." Arya pointed to a small depression in the ridge. "Natural hide elevation advantage, and the wind channels through there differently. She's been there since before we landed." As if in response, a shot cracked across the plateau. The round struck 50 meters from their position, not a miss, but a message. Polaris was announcing herself. Arya unpacked the Chetak methodically, each piece coming together with practiced precision. Her hands were steady, despite the exhaustion of 3 days' preparation. This was muscle memory now deeper than enhancement could ever go. "Arya Nguyen." The voice carried impossibly well across the distance. Polaris was using some kind of acoustic enhancement device. The legend herself. "Tell me, how does it feel to be merely human again?" Arya didn't respond verbally. Instead, she finished assembling her rifle, loaded a magazine, and took her first shot. Not at Polaris, she couldn't see her yet, but at a rock formation near the hide. The bullet struck exactly where she'd aimed, sending a spray of stone chips into the air. Her own message. "I can still reach you." "Impressive," Polaris's voice came again. "But you used to be so much more. I've studied your shots, everyone. The 200-meter miracle. You'll never make that again without the gifts." "She's trying to get in your head," Patch said, setting up his spotting scope. "Let her try." Arya was scanning through her own scope, now looking for the telltale signs. Heat shimmer from body warmth. The glint of glass, anything. But Polaris was good enhanced vision, letting her find perfect concealment. Then Arya noticed something else. Movement on their flanks, tactical teams moving to surround them. "We've got company. 8, maybe 10 operators closing from east and west." "It's not supposed to be a fair fight," Patch said grimly. "It never is." Arya made a quick decision. "Patch, I need you to handle the flankers. I'll deal with Polaris." "Arya, I can't cover both directions with a busted arm. You won't have to." She pulled out a satellite phone, dialed a number. "This is North Star. Execute contingency." "What contingency?" Patch asked. "We didn't plan." The distinctive thrum of rotor blades answered him. 2 helicopters rose from behind a distant ridge, not military, but news choppers bristling with cameras and broadcast equipment. "You brought the media," Patch said, incredulous. "I brought witnesses. Whatever happens here, the world needs to see it. No classified files, no buried reports, just truth." The flanking teams had stopped their advance, clearly not expecting civilian observers. Their rules of engagement had just gotten complicated. Polaris's laughter echoed across the plateau. "Clever, but witnesses won't help you make an impossible shot." "Define impossible," Arya muttered, settling into her shooting position. The wind was gusting now, 15 to 20 meters per second, constantly shifting direction. At 3,000 meters, the bullet would be in flight for nearly 4 seconds. The wind would push it dozens of meters off course, gravity would drop it like a stone, and the thin air at this altitude would affect its stability. Without enhancements, Arya had to calculate all of this consciously, deliberately. It was like trying to solve a calculus equation while juggling. She fired her second shot, this one closer to Polaris's position. The impact showed her how the wind was affecting the bullet's flight, more drift than she'd calculated. She adjusted. "You're fishing," Polaris taunted. "Throwing shots and hoping. The old Arya would have hit me by now." Maybe. But the old Arya would have been dependent on modifications that were killing her. This Arya was rebuilding herself with each shot. The third shot was closer still. Arya could feel the rhythm of the wind, now its patterns emerging from chaos. There was a cycle to it, 15 seconds of steady wind from the west, then a gust from the northwest, then a brief calm. "I see you," she whispered, finally spotting the slightest inconsistency in the ridge's outline. Just a shadow that didn't match the rocks around it. But as she lined up, the shot movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. One of the flanking teams had decided to advance despite the cameras. They were good using cover expertly, but they'd made one mistake. They were moving in formation the way enhanced operators were trained to move. Predictable. Arya swung her rifle to the right, breathed out slowly, and fired. The round traveled 1,800 meters and struck the lead operator's weapon, destroying it. Before he could react, she'd chambered another round and destroyed the second operator's rifle. "Impossible," Patch breathed. "That's 2 shots in 4 seconds at almost 2,000 meters. "Not impossible," Arya corrected, already swinging back to Polaris's position. "Just very difficult." But Polaris had moved. Of course she had. She'd used Arya's distraction to relocate. Now Arya had to find her again, and the flanking teams were regrouping. "Patch smoke grenades 30 meters upwind of our position." "That'll obscure our vision, too." "Trust me." Patch threw the grenades. Purple smoke billowed up, caught by the wind, and streamed across the plateau like a banner. But Arya wasn't watching the smoke, she was watching through her scope at how the smoke moved when it reached Polaris's area, where it eddied and swirled differently. There. A human-shaped void in the smoke pattern where body heat created different air currents. Arya fired. The shot was perfect, or would have been if Polaris hadn't moved at the last millisecond, her enhanced reflexes saving her. The round struck where she'd been, not where she was. "You're getting closer," Polaris admitted, her voice carrying a note of respect now. "But close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades." The smoke was clearing, and Arya could see the flanking teams had pulled back. The news helicopters were circling their cameras, capturing everything. This was becoming a very public demonstration of human versus superhuman capability. Then Arya's satellite phone rang. She answered without taking her eye from the scope. "Sergeant Nguyen." Pierce's voice was tight. "We have a problem. Satellite imagery shows more teams converging on your position. Not just Polaris's people, others. Chinese, Russian, Israeli. They all want to see how this plays out." "How many?" "At least 40 operators, all enhanced. You're about to be in the middle of an international incident." Arya could see them now through her scope. Multiple teams taking positions around the plateau, none trusting the others, all watching her duel with Polaris. "Let them come," she said. "Let them all see what happens when enhancement meets determination." She handed the phone to Patch and settled back behind her rifle. The wind was picking up, gusting to 25 meters per second. At this rate, a 3,000-meter shot would be like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. Perfect. "Polaris!" Arya called out, her voice carrying across the distance. Let's end this. 1 shot each. Best shot wins. Define best, Polaris replied. Arya thought for a moment, then smiled. The child. Silence fell across the plateau. Even the wind seemed to pause. What child? Polaris asked, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. Arya pointed to the village visible in the valley below 8 kilometers away. There's a school down there. Children playing in the yard. One of them is flying a kite, red kite, yellow tail. You can't possibly see that without enhancement. Spotting scope, Patch confirmed, swinging his optic toward the village. She's right, red kite, yellow tail, but that's 8,000 meters. Impossible, Polaris said flatly. No one has ever made a shot at 8,000 meters. The physics don't support it. The physics don't support a lot of things until someone does them anyway. Arya was already adjusting her rifle, adding elevation that seemed absurd. Here's the challenge: we both shoot at the same time. Not to hit the child, God no, but to cut the kite string. Free it. Let it fly. That's insane, even with enhancements. Afraid, the word hung in the air like a challenge. All around the plateau, enhanced operators watched through scopes and binoculars. The news helicopters hovered cameras trained on both positions. Fine, Polaris said finally. On your count. Arya did the math in her head. 8,000 meters. The bullet would be in flight for nearly 12 seconds. It would drop over 1,000 meters. The wind would push it hundreds of meters off course. The rotation of the Earth would affect its path. Even the temperature gradient between here and there would matter. Without enhancements, it was like trying to solve a quantum physics equation while blindfolded. Patch, I need you to call the wind. Not just speed, everything. Temperature gradients, pressure changes, humidity variations. Arya, I'm good, but I'm not that good. Then get good, fast. Patch started calling out readings, his voice a steady rhythm. Arya absorbed the information, building a 3-dimensional model in her mind of how the bullet would fly. It was what the enhancements used to do automatically, but now she had to construct it consciously, deliberately. 3, she called out. She could feel Polaris adjusting her aim, using enhanced vision to see the kite string, perfectly enhanced perception to calculate the exact trajectory needed. 2. The wind gusted suddenly 30 meters per second. Both shooters adjusted, but Arya adjusted differently, not trusting a single calculation, but preparing for multiple possibilities. 1. They fired simultaneously. 2 shots cracked across the plateau. For 12 seconds, nothing happened. Everyone watched, waited, held their breath. Polaris's shot arrived first, passing within a meter of the kite, but missing the string. Arya's shot arrived a half-second later. The kite string parted cleanly. The red kite with its yellow tail soared upward free, dancing on the wind as the child below laughed and pointed at the sky. The plateau erupted. Not in gunfire, but in amazement. Enhanced operators from 6 nations had just watched a human without modifications make an 8,000-meter precision shot that an enhanced sniper had missed. Impossible, Polaris said, but now she was standing visible, her rifle lowered. How? You calculated perfectly, Arya called back. But perfect calculation assumes perfect conditions. The wind shifted in the 11th second, a thermal updraft from the valley. Your enhancements told you to ignore it because it was within margin of error. And I assumed it would happen, because after 4,000 practice shots in 3 days, I learned something: the world doesn't care about our calculations. It does what it wants. The enhancement makes you trust the math. Being human means I trust the chaos. Polaris was walking toward them now, crossing the 3,000 meters of open ground. The other enhanced operators watched, but didn't interfere. The duel was over. When she reached them, Arya could see her clearly for the first time. They really did look alike, the same build, similar features. Sisters in everything but blood. "You know what this means," Polaris said quietly. "If humans can match us without enhancements, the programs will be shut down. All of us enhanced operators will be decommissioned." "No," Arya said. "You'll be freed. The enhancement is killing you just like it was killing me. You have maybe a year before neural degradation becomes irreversible. And without the enhancements, you'll be human, with all the beautiful imperfection that entails." Arya held out the Che-Tak. "Want to try?" Polaris took the rifle hesitantly, like it might bite. She settled behind it, looked through the scope now, just glass, not enhanced optics feeding directly to modified neurons. "Everything looks so limited," she said. "Everything looks possible," Arya corrected. "You just have to be willing to miss a lot before you hit." Polaris aimed at a target Patch had set up only 500 meters a chip shot by their standards. She fired and missed by 2 meters. "See," Arya said. "You're already learning. The enhancement tells you where the bullet will go. Being human means figuring out where it went and adjusting." Around them, the other enhanced operators were descending from their positions, drawn by curiosity. Chinese, Russian, American, Israeli, all the shadow warriors who'd been created to be perfect killers. "Show us," one of them said. A Russian by his accent. "Show us how to shoot without the gifts." Arya looked at Patch, who shrugged. "We've got ammunition." For the next 6 hours, there on Karkh Plateau, something unprecedented happened. Enhanced operators from rival nations sat together learning to shoot like humans. Arya taught them about wind reading without enhanced perception, about calculating drop through experience, rather than modification, about the beautiful uncertainty of taking a shot you might miss. Some adapted quickly. Others struggled so dependent on their enhancements they'd forgotten basic marksmanship. But all of them tried. Pierce called as the sun reached its zenith. "Arya, what the hell is happening up there? Satellite shows 40 enhanced operators having what looks like a shooting clinic." "That's exactly what it is, sir. We're teaching them to be human again." "The Pentagon is losing its mind. The Russians are demanding answers. The Chinese think it's a trap." "It's not a trap. It's a choice." Arya watched as Polaris helped an Israeli operator adjust his position. "We're showing them they don't have to be weapons. They can just be soldiers. And if they don't want to give up their enhancements, then they'll be dead in a year from neural degradation, but at least they'll have a choice." As the day wore on, more helicopters arrived. Not military medical. They carried the counteragent, the same one Arya had used to burn out her enhancements. One by one, the enhanced operators made their choice. Most chose humanity. Polaris was among the last. She stood with the injector in her hand, looking at the sunset painting the plateau gold. "I've been enhanced for 6 years, she said to Arya. "I don't remember what it's like to be just human." "It's frustrating," Arya admitted. "You'll miss shots you should make. You'll fail to see things that seem obvious. You'll have to work harder for less result." "Then why?" "Because when you finally make that impossible shot, it'll be you who made it. Not the modification, not the program. You." Arya touched the bronze badge on her chest. "And that's a feeling no enhancement can replicate." Polaris injected herself. The burning started immediately, the nanobots dying, the modifications reversing the superhuman becoming human. She collapsed, and Arya caught her, held her through the transformation. When it was over, Polaris opened eyes that were no longer enhanced. "Everything's so quiet." "That's peace," Arya said. You're not processing 1,000 calculations per second anymore. You're just existing. The news helicopters captured it all, the greatest gathering of enhanced warriors in history, choosing to become human again. By nightfall, only 3 of the 40 had refused the counteragent. They left quietly, knowing their time was limited. Walsh arrived on the last helicopter, bringing news from the wider world. The UN Security Council held an emergency session, she reported. They're drafting a treaty banning human enhancement for military purposes, the North Star Accords, they're calling it. Will it hold? Patch asked. It might now that everyone's seen what happened here. A human beat 40 enhanced operators, then taught them to be human again. That's a story that changes minds. General Pierce stepped off the helicopter, looking older, but somehow lighter. Sergeant Nguyen, the president wants to give you a medal. I've got one, Arya said, touching the bronze badge. This is enough. The 3 200-meter badge, after today, shouldn't it say 8,000? No, 3 200 is where I stopped being superhuman and started being extraordinary. That's the distance that matters. Reed was on the helicopter, too shackled but alert. He'd been watching everything through the windows. You know this won't end it, he said. Someone will try again. Better enhancements, more stable modifications. The temptation of superhuman capability is too strong. Maybe, Arya agreed. But now they know it's not necessary. That human potential properly developed can match any enhancement. And when the next generation of modifications comes, when they create something you can't match. Arya looked at the crowd of former enhanced operators, all learning to shoot again like recruits. Tomorrow they'd return to their countries, their agencies, their lives. But they'd carry with them the knowledge that limitation wasn't fixed, that impossible was negotiable. Then we'll do what humans have always done, she said. We'll adapt, learn, and overcome. Without modifications, without enhancements, just determination and the refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The sun set, fully painting Kark Plateau in purples and shadows. The wind had calmed to a gentle breeze, the kind that made long-range shooting merely difficult instead of insane. Polaris, who'd chosen the name Sarah, her name from before enhancement, stood beside Arya, holding a borrowed rifle. Want to try for that 3 200 meters? She asked. As humans this time. Arya smiled. Why stop there? They set up side by side 2 snipers who'd been created to be weapons, but had chosen to be human. The target was barely visible in the dying light, a small white square against dark rock. Distance? Sarah asked. 3 500 meters, Patch called out. Wind negligible, temperature dropping, visibility poor. Perfect, both women said simultaneously. They fired together the 2 shots, echoing across the plateau like thunder. 4 seconds of flight time, 4 seconds of uncertainty. Both shots hit not perfect, but close enough. Again, Sarah asked. Again. Arya agreed. They shot until full darkness fell, until even muzzle flash couldn't illuminate their targets. Not every shot hit, most missed, actually. But that was the point. Missing was human. Learning from the miss was growth. And growing was what separated humans from weapons. Pierce watched from the helicopter as they packed up, understanding something fundamental had shifted. The age of super soldiers hadn't ended, it had never truly begun. Because humans, pushed to their limits, trained to their potential, were already super enough. What now? He asked Arya as she loaded the Chetak into its case one final time. Now we teach, she said. Every enhanced operator who chose humanity needs to relearn their craft. Every sniper who thinks 2,000 meters is impossible needs to know it's not. Every military that thinks it needs enhanced warriors needs to see what trained humans can do. That's a lot of work. I've got time. We all do now that we're not dying from modifications. The helicopters lifted off one by one, carrying former superhumans back to humanity. The plateau, which had hosted the most important shot in military history, twice, now fell silent. But in ranges around the world, inspired by what they'd seen on the news, snipers were attempting distances they'd never imagined. Some would fail, most would fail, but some would succeed. And with each success, the definition of impossible would shift a little further. On the helicopter ride back, Arya pulled out a notebook and began writing. Not a report for the Pentagon or a technical manual for snipers. Something simpler. "What's that?" Patch asked. "Rules," she replied. "For the school we're going to build." "School?" "For everyone who wants to learn that enhancement isn't in the modification." She showed him the first rule she'd written. Rule 1. The impossible shot is the one you don't take. "Good rule," Patch said. "What's Rule 2? Arya thought for a moment, then wrote Rule 2. Every limit is negotiable with enough practice. By the time they landed, she had 20 rules. By the time she briefed the Pentagon, she had 50. By the time the North Star School of Advanced Marksmanship opened its doors 6 months later, she had 100. But the most important rule, the one carved above the entrance, was the simplest: extraordinary is a choice. Choose it. The school's first class had 40 students, the enhanced operators who'd chosen humanity at Kark. The second class had 400 snipers from 50 nations who wanted to push past their limits. By the fifth class, the waiting list was 2 years long. And somewhere in Virginia, in a secure facility, the last enhanced operator who'd refused the counteragent sat in a medical bed, neural degradation advancing rapidly. He could still see the wind in dust motes, still calculate trajectories perfectly, still make impossible shots. But his hands shook too much to hold a rifle. "I should have listened," he told Arya when she visited. She came every week bringing news from the school, stories of impossible shots made by unenhanced humans. "You still can," she said, holding out the injector one last time. "The degradation is advanced, but not irreversible. Not yet." He looked at the injector, at his shaking hands, at the badge on her chest that had started everything. "Will I still be able to shoot?" "Not like you can now. But maybe better because it'll be you shooting, not the program." He took the injector. 3 months later, he made a 200-meter shot in high wind, not perfect, but his. The first shot that was truly his in 7 years. He cried. Arya understood. She'd cried too the first time she'd made a long shot after losing her enhancements, not from sadness, but from joy. The joy of achieving something impossible through nothing but human will. The world changed slowly, then quickly. The North Star Accords held backed by the undeniable proof that enhancement wasn't necessary. Military doctrine shifted from creating super soldiers to developing extraordinary humans. The definition of impossible moved further out each year, and on a range in Virginia, a woman who'd once been superhuman taught others to be extraordinary, not through modification or enhancement, but through the oldest human enhancement of all, the refusal to accept limitations, the willingness to fail until you succeed, the choice to be extraordinary. Every morning, Arya touched the bronze badge on her chest, 200 meters, the shot that had started a revolution. Not because it was impossible, but because someone had chosen to make it possible. Just like the 4,000-meter shots students were making now. Just like the 5,000-meter shot someone would make tomorrow. Just like every impossible thing humans would achieve, not because they were enhanced, but because they were human. And that Arya knew, as she watched the sun rise over the range, was the most extraordinary thing of all. The general who'd once walked past her Barrett 50 and frozen at her badge now stood beside her watching students attempt impossible shots. "Any regrets?" Pierce asked. Arya chambered a round in her Chetak, aimed at a target 200 meters away, the commemorative distance, the one that started everything. "Just one," she said. "What's that?" She fired. The shot was perfect, the bullet finding center mass after 4 seconds of flight. "I should have started teaching sooner." And with that, she turned to the next student, ready to teach another human that impossible was just a word, and words could be rewritten with enough determination, skill, and the willingness to take the shot everyone said you'd miss. The revolution wasn't over. It was just beginning. And it would be won not by super soldiers or enhanced warriors, but by humans who'd learned the oldest lesson of all. That extraordinary wasn't something you were given. It was something you chose. Every day, one impossible shot at a time.